They didn't ask. They instructed. "We'll need you to stay overnight, Mrs. McRae, just for observation." I wasn't offered clarification, only a thin plastic bracelet, tight on my wrist, stamped with red, "Do not discharge." It felt less like a precaution and more like a verdict. I came in for a routine checkup. Blood pressure had been slightly elevated last time, nothing unusual for a 74-year-old. My primary, Dr. Feldman, had referred me just to be thorough. I didn't argue. I've always trusted doctors. That was my first mistake. The waiting room smelled like hand sanitizer and cheap coffee. I brought my crossword book, expecting to be out before lunch. But after a rushed nurse drew blood and told me to wait here for the attending, I realized something wasn't right. Not wrong. Not yet. Just misaligned, like a button pushed through the wrong hole. They took me to the third floor, room 312. A double. My roommate was a silent figure under a faded floral blanket, back turned to the door. No movement, not even a cough. I wasn't introduced. The nurse, young, distracted, dropped a paper cup with pills on the side table and left before I could ask what they were. I didn't take them. Instead, I pressed the call button. After 15 minutes, another nurse arrived. A different one. Tall, with tired eyes and a badge that read, Mel. "Yes?" "There's been a mistake," I said calmly. "I was only here for a routine checkup. I need to speak with the attending." She sighed, not rudely, but like someone 3 hours past her shift. "They flagged some numbers in your blood work. You've been admitted for observation." "Which numbers?" "I don't have that info. The doctor will explain during rounds." I glanced at my wrist. That damned bracelet again. "Do not discharge." My name beneath it. My birth date. As if the hospital needed reminding I was real. I tried to call my daughter Claire. It went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Claire. I can't pick up right now." I hung up. My hands were steady, but inside, something began to buzz. Not panic, not yet. Just a steady hum of resistance. Lunch came on a plastic tray. Mushy peas, gray chicken, tea in a paper cup. I didn't touch it. The woman in the next bed didn't move. When the doctor finally came, a man in his 50s with restless fingers and expensive shoes, he barely looked at me. "Mrs. McRae, we've decided to keep you overnight. Your hemoglobin is slightly low, and we want to monitor you." "Slightly? That justifies an admittance?" "It's precautionary." "Then remove the bracelet. I'll stay voluntarily." He blinked. "It's protocol, nothing personal." Everything in this place was protocol. The cup of pills. The silence. The woman in the bed next to mine who hadn't said a word in hours. I asked again. "Am I being held?" He smiled. The kind of smile men use when they don't plan to answer the question. "Rest, Mrs. McRae. You're in good hands." He left before I could reply. It was mid-afternoon. The room was quiet except for the distant murmur of monitors. I stood and walked to the mirror above the sink. The face that looked back at me wasn't surprised. Tired, maybe, but not shocked. I had been here before. Not this hospital, but this place. The place where decisions are made about you, not with you. Where age is a diagnosis. Where polite silence is expected. But I have never done silence well. I picked up the paper cup of pills and flushed them down the toilet. Then I sat on the bed, lifted my arm, and stared at the bracelet. "Do not discharge." Fine. Then I'll decide what that means. The woman in the other bed hadn't moved since I arrived. She lay curled toward the wall, her spine a gentle slope beneath the blanket. I watched for signs of breath. Shallow, yes. But there. A rise. A fall. She wasn't asleep, or at least not deeply. But she didn't acknowledge me either. I didn't speak first. Not because I'm shy, I'm not, but because I've learned something, especially in these places. People don't always want to be seen, and those who do, they'll find a way to let you know. Instead, I focused on the room. Sterile beige, faux wood cabinets that didn't open, a television bolted to the wall that played daytime court shows at a low, muttering volume, a window that looked out over a parking lot where pigeons circled the dumpsters. It wasn't a place for recovery. It was a place for forgetting. A nurse came in mid-morning. Not Mel. This one was younger, brisk, the type who walks like she's chasing a fire. She glanced at her clipboard. "You're due for vitals." "No, thank you," I said. She froze. "Excuse me? I'm not consenting to anything else until I speak to someone who can explain what I'm being observed for." She lowered the clipboard. "Ma'am, we need to monitor—" "I'm not a ma'am. My name is Hannah McRae. You've got it right there. Use it." Her lips tightened. "I'll let the attending know." "Good. Tell him to bring my chart with him." She left without another word. That was the second time someone walked out of the room rather than talk to me. The first had a lab coat. This one had sneakers and an earpiece. I didn't see much difference between them. An hour passed. No one came. I tried Claire again. This time she answered. "Hi, Mom. Can I call you back in 5? I'm in a meeting." "No, you can't. I need you to listen." That got her attention. "What's going on?" "I'm in the hospital. They've admitted me without clear explanation. They've put a do not discharge bracelet on my wrist. No one's told me why." A pause. "Wait, what hospital? When did this happen?" "This morning. I came in for routine blood work. Now I'm in room 312 at Springdale Regional." "I thought it was just a checkup." "So did I." She was quiet. "Then, did they find something?" "They say my hemoglobin's a little low." "That's it?" "Apparently enough to lock me in." "Mom," Claire said, gently now, "maybe they're just being careful." "Claire, I'm telling you, something's not right." There was the faint sound of keyboard clicking on her end. "I'll call Dr. Feldman. Let me check in with him. Okay?" "Okay," I said, though it wasn't. "I'll call you back." When the line went dead, I realized how badly I'd wanted her to stay on it. Across the room, my roommate stirred. A creak of the bed. A sigh. I turned, and she was facing me now. Eyes open, fixed. She was maybe 10 years younger than me, but looked older. Her hair had been cropped short, unevenly, like it had been done in a hurry. Her face was pale, her lips chapped. She spoke first. "They keep me because I don't speak much. They think I'm confused." Her voice was soft, measured, not the voice of confusion. "What's your name?" I asked. "Lucinda." "They said you were confused?" "I had a fall. Hit my head. I forgot my address for a few minutes in the ER. That was enough." Her eyes didn't leave mine. "I've been here 3 weeks." I stared at her, trying to read her expression, but there was no fear there, just a quiet resignation, like someone who had accepted a sentence without trial. "Have you asked to leave?" I said. "They say I'm not ready." "But are you?" "I was ready 2 weeks ago." Something cold rippled through me. Not for me, for her. For the silent way someone can be erased by process. "Do you have family?" I asked. "A brother in Vermont. We're not close." She looked away then, toward the window. "Mostly it's just me." We didn't speak for a while. There wasn't anything left to say that could make the silence feel less dangerous. Later, a different nurse came in. Older, heavy-set, with a calm presence. She was the first to look me in the eye. "Mrs. McRae, I'm Donna. I'm taking over the evening rounds. Anything you need?" "Yes," I said. "An explanation." She hesitated. "I'm not a doctor, but I'll ask the attending to come back. You can also bring me a copy of my chart. Legally, I'm entitled to it." Donna didn't argue. She just nodded. "I'll see what I can do." Then, as she turned to leave, she added quietly, "You're not the first to ask. Don't stop asking." I didn't. But I was starting to understand what kind of place I'd been dropped into. It wasn't a hospital. It was a net. And someone had decided I belonged in it. When I was younger, I thought institutions were built to protect people. Schools, banks, hospitals. They all wore the same face. Authority wrapped in paperwork. Back then, I believed that if you followed the rules, asked politely, and had your facts straight, you'd be treated fairly. That was before I learned about the protocols. Donna returned with a folder. Slim, white, medical. She handed it to me like it might break. Technically, we're not supposed to give it without formal process, but you asked. She stood there while I flipped it open. No diagnosis codes on the first page. Just intake notes. Hemoglobin slightly low. Recommendation, inpatient observation. Duration, to be reassessed. Next page. Routine test results. Mostly normal. Nothing alarming. One flagged note from an overnight nurse. Patient, reluctant to comply with instructions. I looked up. What instructions? Donna raised an eyebrow. They're vague with that line. Could mean you didn't take meds. Didn't want vitals. Didn't smile on cue. I flushed the pills, I said. She didn't flinch. Good. I stared at her. You said I wasn't the first. What did you mean? She sighed, lowering herself into the armchair by the window. This floor sees a lot of elder patients, some alone, some confused, some just tired of the noise. The doctors have leeway. They can mark you hold for observation with nothing more than a box ticked and a sentence about concern. And they get paid for that. Donna nodded slowly. Insurance covers short-term holds. Medicare does too. The longer you're here, the more it stacks up. So I'm a revenue stream. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. Is that what happened to Lucinda? I asked. Donna's eyes flicked toward the other bed. She's a quiet one. No one visits. No one checks in. Easy to overlook. I closed the folder. My hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. Who signed the admittance form? Dr. Park, on rotation today. You haven't seen him yet? I've seen enough shoes and shoulders, I said. No faces. Donna smiled faintly. He's efficient. I stood. Bring him in. You'll need to wait for evening rounds. Then I'll wait at the nurse's station. She blinked. You want to walk out there? I'm not a prisoner, am I? Donna looked at me, really looked, for the first time. Then she stood, nodded, and said, I'll walk with you. We moved slowly through the hallway. I had my slippers on and the ridiculous hospital gown covered with my cardigan. No one tried to stop me. That was the most revealing part. At the nurse's station, a man in scrubs, maybe 30 max, looked up from his monitor. You can't be here, he said. I'm not under arrest, I replied. He opened his mouth. Donna stepped forward. She's waiting to speak with Dr. Park. You'll need to go back to your room. No, I said. I'll wait here. He stared, unsure. That's the thing about people like him. Confident, until something doesn't fit the script. I sat in the plastic chair near the desk and folded my hands in my lap. Donna gave me a small nod, then left. It took 35 minutes. When Dr. Park finally arrived, he didn't notice me at first. He walked right past, talking to another nurse. I stood. "Dr. Park?" I said. He stopped, looked at me, didn't smile. "Yes? I'd like to speak with you. I'm heading into rounds. I'm a patient, room 312. You signed my admittance. I want to know why." He glanced at the nurse beside him, then back at me. "I believe you're Mrs. McRae." "You believe correctly. Your blood work showed anomalies. We're being cautious." "Anomalies?" "Low hemoglobin, slight imbalance in sodium." "Slight. You admitted me for slight." He shifted. "Combined with your age and your reluctance, we felt overnight observation was appropriate." "My age is not a disease," I said. "And reluctance to swallow mystery pills is not a psychiatric symptom." A nurse nearby tried to stifle a grin. Dr. Park noticed. His mouth tightened. "Mrs. McRae, if you have concerns, there are formal channels. I suggest you follow them." "I've started to," I said, holding up the folder, "starting with requesting my chart and continuing with a written complaint, and possibly legal counsel." That made him blink. I took a breath. "You can remove the do not discharge bracelet now, or I can continue building the case for unlawful detainment." His gaze slid from my eyes to the chart in my hand. He didn't answer. "I'll return to my room," I said, "but I'm not finished." As I walked away, I heard the nurse mutter, "Damn." And Donna, at the end of the hall, smiled. Back in my room, Lucinda looked at me. "Did he listen?" "No," I said, sitting down. "But he heard me." Lucinda nodded, as if that was enough. But I wasn't sure it was. Claire didn't call me back that night. I sat up in bed, watching the shadows stretch and shift across the beige walls as the hospital grew quieter. Lucinda had drifted into one of her fitful half-sleeps, mumbling softly, fingers twitching beneath her blanket. The television murmured nonsense in the corner, two women yelling over a man in a paternity suit. I turned the volume down and waited. At 9:17 p.m., my phone finally lit up. Claire, calling. I answered before the second ring. "Mom, I'm sorry," she said. "The day got away from me. I needed you to follow up." "I did." She hesitated. "I talked to Feldman's assistant. They said your numbers were slightly irregular, but that they expected you'd be home by tomorrow." I exhaled sharply. "Then why is there a red bracelet on my wrist that says do not discharge?" "What?" "Exactly what I said. That's what they labeled me. Like luggage. No explanation. No clarity." There was a pause. "That sounds dramatic, Mom. Maybe it's just their system." "It's not the system. It's how people hide behind the system." Claire went quiet again. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Maybe you're just scared." "Of course I'm scared," I said, sharper than I intended. "But not of dying, Claire. Of being disappeared, quietly, with forms and folders and smiles. Of people thinking they know better just because I'm old and alone." "I didn't say you were alone. You didn't have to." Silence stretched between us like a taut thread. "I'll come in the morning," she said finally. "You don't need to." "I want to." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. In people, in family, in her. She used to call me every Sunday without fail. Then every other Sunday. Then only when Toby needed help with his science project or when she was driving between errands. After we hung up, I lay back and stared at the ceiling. Lucinda spoke. She's your daughter? Yes. She sounds like mine used to. Lucinda's voice was thin but steady. The part where she wants to want to help? I didn't ask more. I didn't need to. Sometimes you don't need a whole story to feel its weight. At midnight, I was woken by someone entering the room. Not Donna. A new nurse, male, pale, freckled, with sleepy eyes and a clipboard. He didn't knock. He didn't say hello. He flicked on the overhead light, flooding the room. Vitals, he mumbled. Lucinda stirred, groaning. I'm sleeping, I said. Routine check. At midnight? He didn't respond, just reached for the cuff on the side table. I'm declining, I said clearly. You can't. I can. I sat up, pushing the cuff away. I am not refusing care. I am asserting my right to informed consent. He blinked at me. Then, without a word, he turned and left. Lucinda chuckled, eyes still closed. Your trouble, she said. I'm awake, I replied. That's all it takes, apparently. In the morning, I was moved to a different room. No warning, no explanation. Just a knock on the door, a pair of orderlies, and a brisk, "We're transferring you to 318. Why? I asked. Don't know. Orders from upstairs. Lucinda looked up from her bed. Her face was tight with worry. I turned to the shorter of the two orderlies, a woman with kind eyes. Is Lucinda staying? Yes, ma'am. Then I'd like to remain too. We can't authorize that. You already have, by admitting me without cause. The taller orderly cleared his throat. Ma'am, please. They weren't cruel, just mechanical, like all the gears here. So I stood, packed my things, a cardigan, a toothbrush, the folded crossword book, and walked to the door. Lucinda's voice stopped me. Will you come back? I turned to her. If they let me. She smiled, small and sad. They won't. Room 318 was private. A single bed, a better view, a corner of sky instead of dumpsters. The walls were painted the same bland cream, but somehow it felt colder, like it was made to look nice enough that you wouldn't question the lock on the invisible door. I sat on the bed and waited. At 10:04 a.m., Dr. Park entered without knocking. Good morning, he said. This time he looked at me, briefly. You'll be discharged this afternoon. I didn't move. Because of what I said? He didn't answer. Or because you realized you had no grounds? Still nothing. You separated me from Lucinda, I said. She's under extended observation. She's also coherent. More than most of the staff I've met. Dr. Park folded his arms. You're being released. You should be satisfied. That's where you're wrong, I said. I'm just getting started. He didn't like that. I could see it in the tightness around his jaw. I smiled. The kind of smile old women aren't supposed to make. The one that says I see you, and you're not invisible to me either. I want a full copy of my records, I said. And I want a printed copy of the hospital's patient rights. You can ask at discharge. I'm not asking, I'm asserting. He left without a word. At noon, Claire arrived. She brought tulips, the good kind, the kind you buy when you're feeling guilty. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her face was flushed. Are you okay? She asked. I didn't answer. I just held out my wrist. She stared at the red bracelet. Then she sat down. I had no idea. I know. They're letting you go? Yes. Why now? I made noise. Claire looked at me, really looked, for the first time in a long while. Let's get you home, she said. I have one more thing to do first. And I did, but not for me. They let me walk out without a word. No wheelchair escort, no nurse handing me a packet of discharge instructions, no warm wishes for a speedy recovery. Just a man in scrubs pointing to the elevator and saying, "That way?" Like I'd been a misplaced delivery finally rerouted. Claire held the tulips in one hand and my overnight bag in the other. I carried the envelope they'd reluctantly printed for me, medical records, patient rights, and one short form titled Observation Summary. It didn't contain an apology. It didn't contain anything useful. But I wasn't leaving to feel satisfied. I was leaving to remember who I was. We drove in silence for the first few minutes. The car smelled like leather seats and Claire's perfume. Her hands gripped the wheel a little too tightly. "You really didn't know?" I asked finally. Claire glanced at me, then back at the road. "I didn't want to think it could happen. Not like that. Not to you." "That's the problem," I said. "We never think it'll happen until it does." My house was still there, unchanged. The lilac bush I planted after my husband died had bloomed early, scattering pale petals across the steps. The mail had piled up in the box. Everything looked like it had just been paused. I stepped inside and breathed in the scent of old wood and home. Claire followed, quiet. "You can set the flowers on the table," I said. "Do you want me to stay?" I shook my head. "Not now." She hesitated. "Mom, I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not listening sooner. For not calling. You did what people do when they're tired. You assumed someone else would look after me." Claire winced. "I didn't mean to." "I know," I said. "But you did." She stood in the hallway like she didn't know where to put her arms. I realized in that moment how far apart we'd grown, not just in years, but in shape. The shape of our lives, our choices, our silences. "I'm going to write a letter," I said. "To who?" "The hospital, the state board, maybe a journalist." Claire blinked. "Are you serious?" "Deadly." She opened her mouth, closed it again. "Okay, if you want help, I'll let you know." I made tea and sat by the window. The envelope lay on the table beside me. I pulled out the papers, flipping through the medical records first. Page after page of neutral observations and abbreviations. There was a note from the first nurse I'd refused pills from. Patient non-compliant, resistant to protocol. Non-compliant. The most damning word in any system. Not unwell, not dangerous, not confused. Just unwilling to go along. That's all it takes. I wrote the letter longhand, the way I used to write letters to the editor when something in town went wrong. The park closures, the school lunch budget. My pen was slow but steady. I told them what happened, the facts, the dates, the names. Then I told them what it felt like. To be processed, to be ignored, to watch your autonomy stripped with polite words and impersonal procedures. I told them about Lucinda. I asked questions I knew they wouldn't answer, not directly. But I wanted the letter to live in a file somewhere, in someone's inbox, on someone's desk, like a small, stubborn flag refusing to be pulled down. When I finished, I signed my name in blue ink. The next morning, I mailed it. Not by email, not with a click. I walked to the post office in my good shoes, with the heel I'd glued back myself. I stood in line behind a man buying stamps and a woman returning a package. When it was my turn, I handed the envelope across the counter. "To the hospital?" the clerk asked, reading the return address. "Yes." He weighed it, slapped a sticker on, and slid it into the bin behind him. "That's it?" I asked. "That's it." Back home, I made a second cup of tea and opened my crossword. I only filled in 3 words before I stopped. I was thinking about Lucinda. I had her last name from the chart, Delgado. I remembered her brother was in Vermont. That was all I had. But it was enough. I sat down at my old laptop and started searching. I looked for patient rights advocacy groups, for pro bono elder law clinics, for any name attached to Delgado and Springdale Regional. It took time. I took notes on a yellow legal pad, the kind I hadn't used since my bookkeeping days. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it all yet, but I knew I wouldn't let her be forgotten. Not like they wanted. That afternoon, the phone rang. Not Claire, not the hospital. It was a woman who introduced herself as Camille Jameson from the Office of Patient Advocacy. She'd received my letter. "We take reports like yours seriously, Mrs. McRae," she said. "Do you?" "Yes." "Then don't just read it. Do something." "We've opened a preliminary review." I didn't ask what that meant. I knew their language. It meant paperwork, delays, but it also meant someone had been forced to look. "Will you investigate Lucinda Delgado's case?" There was a pause. "We'll look into it." "Good." I hung up and stared at the wall. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt necessary. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for. Outside, the lilac petals kept falling. The wind didn't ask their permission either. But at least they fell with dignity. The following Tuesday, I found a letter in my mailbox from Springdale Regional Hospital. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't personal. It was 4 paragraphs long, printed on letterhead with a gold embossed seal at the top. The kind that tries too hard to look official, hoping the gleam will blind you to its emptiness. It began, "Dear Mrs. McRae, thank you for your recent correspondence regarding your experience at our facility. Not, we're sorry. Not, we acknowledge wrongdoing. Just thank you." Like I'd sent in a suggestion about soup flavor in the cafeteria. They went on to say that your concerns have been forwarded to our quality assurance team, and that Springdale Regional is committed to upholding the highest standards of care for all patients, regardless of age or background. Regardless of age. That was the part that made me laugh. A dry, quiet laugh that didn't feel good in my throat. That clause shouldn't have been necessary, but they knew what they were doing. That line was for me. They knew who I was. More importantly, they knew I wasn't going to shut up. 2 days later, I got a voicemail from Claire. "Hi, Mom. Listen, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About how you were treated. About what you said. I talked to Toby about it. He was shocked, too. He said you sounded stronger than ever." I smiled at that. "Anyway, I was wondering if you'd like to come to his graduation next month. I know it's a lot of travel, but I think it'd mean something if you were there." I listened to the message twice. Then I sat with it. Not because I didn't know my answer, but because I wanted to feel the shift. The weight of the distance between us starting, just barely, to close. That night, I called Donna. I had tracked down the number through a nurses' union directory, then left a message asking if she'd be willing to speak. She picked up on the second ring. "Mrs. McRae," she said, her voice calm as ever. "You found me. I don't forget the people who show up. I'm glad you're out." "I'm not done," I said. "I didn't think you were." We talked for 25 minutes. About Lucinda. About the red bracelets. About how many other patients were admitted with the same vague notes and quietly shuffled into long-term observation. "You were the first to push back in a way that stuck," Donna said. "Then help me make sure I'm not the last." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was lower. "There's a file," she said. In the nursing supervisor's office, not electronic, handwritten, internal. It's called the yellow list. The what? Patients marked as hold friendly, people without family, or with history of compliance, ones that don't fight back. I went cold. Lucinda's on it? She's been on it since the second day. I checked. Can you get a copy? She was quiet again. Maybe. Do it, I said. And get out of there. You don't owe them your silence. I hung up and sat very still. My hands were calm, but I felt a pulse in my throat, like something rising. Not panic, not fear, but purpose. That file, that list, it was real. They had made a list, and someone like Lucinda, quiet, tired, unseen, someone like me, had been written onto it like a liability. The next morning, I wrote a second letter. This one was to a local reporter I'd once met at a community bake sale. Her name was Nadia Patel, and I remembered how she'd asked too many questions about the fundraising permits. She had a sharpness I liked. I told her what happened. I told her about the yellow list. I didn't beg for attention. I offered a story. And sometimes, that's all it takes. By Friday, Nadia had emailed me. She wanted to meet. We chose a quiet cafe in the older part of town, the kind with mismatched chairs and scones that were more biscuit than bread. Nadia arrived early. She wore a denim jacket and no makeup, but her eyes missed nothing. Mrs. McCrae, she said, shaking my hand, you don't look like someone who just got out of a hospital fight. Then they didn't look close enough, I said. We sat. I told her everything. She took notes by hand, scribbling fast, underlining things. When I mentioned Donna, she paused. Would she speak to me? Not yet, I said, but she's thinking about it. Nadia nodded. What about Lucinda? She's still there. Her jaw tightened. I'll follow up, she said. I'll start with the board, the financial records, the admission statistics. Then we'll go to print. That night, I received an email. It was from Donna. A photo, blurry but readable. A yellow folder cover with a label written in marker. Long OBS potential extensions. Inside, a list of names, dates, notes like quiet, elderly, no family contact. Lucinda was third from the top, and beneath her name, another note. Possible transfer to long-term care. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up the phone. Claire, I said when she answered. Hey, Mom, I was just about to... I need a favor. Okay. I need you to drive me to the hospital tomorrow. What for? They're transferring Lucinda. Claire paused. What are you planning to do? Something loud. She was quiet for a beat. I'll pick you up at 10. Sometimes the loudest thing a woman can do isn't yell. It's show up. Claire pulled up to the curb at 9:59, punctual in that way only people with something to prove tend to be. She had coffee in a travel mug for herself and a thermos for me. Strong, black, no sugar, just how I like it. It was the first time in months she'd remembered a detail like that without me needing to repeat it. You sure about this? She asked as I fastened my seatbelt. I was sure yesterday. I'm angrier today. She didn't smile, but her mouth twitched like it wanted to. We drove in silence most of the way. Springdale Regional loomed into view like a fortress pretending to be a place of healing. Clean lines, mirrored glass, the sterile illusion of control. Claire pulled into the visitor lot. I'll wait in the car, she said. No, you're coming in. She blinked. Why? Because you're my witness, my daughter, my ride home if I get thrown out. She laughed under her breath. Can't argue with that. The lobby hadn't changed. Same flickering vending machine, same flat-screen TV on a muted health channel. But this time, I walked in not as a patient, not as someone they could fold into protocol, but as someone with teeth. At the reception desk, a young woman with careful hair and anxious eyes looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes. I'm here to speak with the nurse supervisor on the 3rd floor. It's urgent." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but she'll want to make time." The girl hesitated, reaching for the phone. "Tell her it's about a patient in 312, Lucinda Delgado, and tell her I'm not leaving without answers." Claire stood beside me, quiet, but her hand hovered near mine, not quite touching, but present. The receptionist made the call, murmured something too low to hear, then gave me a tight nod. "She'll be down shortly." It took 10 minutes. The woman who appeared was tall, mid-50s, with a clipboard and the posture of someone used to complaints. Her badge read, "Marla Easton, Nursing Admin." "Mrs. McRae?" she said. "Yes. I understand you have concerns about a patient?" "About the system that's swallowing her." Marla blinked. "Excuse me?" "Lucinda Delgado, room 312. You're transferring her today, aren't you?" "I'm not at liberty to—" "She's on your yellow list," I interrupted. "I know about it. I've seen it. A file full of names. People like Lucinda. Old. Alone. Easy to bill. Easy to silence." Marla's lips parted slightly, but she didn't deny it. That was all I needed. "You're transferring her to long-term care, without cause, without advocacy. I can't discuss another patient's— I'm not here to gossip. I'm here to stop it." Behind me, Claire stepped forward. "My mother has documentation," she said. "She's already spoken to the Office of Patient Advocacy. And a reporter." Marla's face shifted at that word. Reporter. Like someone had just turned on a bright light in a room where secrets slept. "This isn't the place," she said tightly. "Let's step into my office." "No," I said. "This conversation stays where it started, in public." People were watching now. Patients in wheelchairs, family members, even one of the janitors pausing with his mop. I didn't want their pity. I wanted their eyes, their ears. I held up the photo Donna had sent me, the yellow folder with Lucinda's name. "This is real. This list is real. And unless someone here tells me otherwise, I'm going to assume everyone who works on this floor is complicit." Marla's hand clenched around her clipboard. "I'll call upstairs," she said finally. "See what I can find." She walked off stiffly, heels clicking. I watched her go, then exhaled slowly. Claire looked at me. "That was louder than I planned?" She shook her head. "Perfect." 30 minutes later, Marla returned with a forced smile. "Ms. Delgado's transfer has been postponed, indefinitely. The attending physician will reassess next week." I narrowed my eyes. "Why next week?" "She's stable, not under immediate risk. We're reevaluating her care plan." "Or you're buying time to rewrite the files." Marla didn't respond. I stepped closer. "Tell me something. How many other Lucindas do you have up there?" She flinched. "How many names are on that list?" Marla glanced over her shoulder, lowered her voice. "Too many." "And now?" Her gaze met mine. "Fewer." Claire and I left the building together, side by side. The air outside smelled like city dust and sun. I hadn't realized how loud the hospital had been until I stepped into the quiet. "I didn't know you had that in you," Claire said. "You forget," I told her. "I raised you." She smiled, wide, honest, the way she used to. I think I'm going to visit more. I think you are too. That evening, I received another email from Nadia, the reporter, a draft of her article. The title stopped me. The Yellow List: How Hospitals Quietly Hold the Forgotten. Below it, the subtitle: One Woman's Fight to Make the Invisible Visible, and What It Means for All of Us. There was a quote from me midway through. I'm not asking for favors. I'm demanding dignity. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone had heard me. Really heard me. The article dropped on a Monday. It went online first. A quiet post on the local paper's website, sandwiched between city council updates and a piece about the farmer's market. But by noon, it had caught fire. Claire texted me a link before I even saw it myself. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. First, it was Marla, the nurse supervisor. Her voice unusually soft. Mrs. McRae, I wanted to thank you for speaking up. Some of us didn't know how to push back. She didn't stay on the line long. I didn't expect her to. Then came Donna. You blew the door off, Hannah. You handed me the keys. She laughed, and I could hear something lighter in it this time. Not relief, not triumph, just air. The kind people breathe when they stop being afraid. By midweek, Nadia's story had been shared over 12,000 times. Small numbers by internet standards, maybe. But in a town like ours, that meant everybody had seen it, or at least heard someone muttering about it over coffee. It wasn't just about Lucinda. Nadia had done her homework: patient data, financial incentives, testimony from another family who discovered their father had been kept 4 days past medical necessity for monitoring. He'd been billed $6,200. He never spoke of it. Most don't. But Lucinda, her name was there. A pseudonym by request, but her story was unmistakable. Quiet, sharp, held longer than needed. No one called, no one asked, until someone did. That Thursday, I returned to the hospital, voluntarily this time. No bracelet, no clipboard. Lucinda was sitting up in bed, dressed in her own clothes, a navy blouse and soft gray pants. Her hair had been combed back neatly. Her chart was missing from the foot of the bed. She looked at me as I stepped into the room, eyes wide but calm. You came back. Of course I did. I thought maybe you'd forget. I smiled, sitting down beside her. Impossible. She reached over slowly, her hand pale and cool on mine. They said I'm going home next week. That's good. To a place I don't remember, she added, looking down. Some kind of assisted apartment. A coordinator called. Said there's a small kitchenette. A window facing trees. Do you want that? I want a door I can close, and someone who knocks. I nodded. I might not remember all my numbers, she whispered, but I remember how it felt to be treated like a thing, and how it felt when someone didn't let it happen. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, a bird tapped against the window pane. Lucinda turned her head toward it like it had called her by name. That evening, Claire and I had dinner together for the first time in months. Not in a hospital cafeteria, not in the car. At my kitchen table, where the wood was still scratched from when Toby was little and liked to spin his spoon like a top. She brought takeout, good Chinese from the place we used to go when her father was still alive. She unpacked everything like it was a gift: crispy duck, scallion pancakes, steamed dumplings. I didn't know what you were in the mood for, she said. This, I said. Exactly this. She poured tea. No sugar. Remembered again. Midway through dinner, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Something I wanted to show you. I opened it. It was an invitation. Toby McRae, Bachelor of Science, Class of 2025. Commencement Ceremony, University of Pennsylvania. He wanted to send it himself, Claire said, but I asked if I could be the one to hand it to you. I looked at the gold lettering, the elegant serif font. You really think I'm up for the trip? I think you've always been up for more than I gave you credit for. I folded the paper and set it beside my plate. I'll be there. Later that night, I opened the windows wide and sat at my desk. I pulled out the same yellow notepad I'd used the day I wrote the hospital letter. I made a new list. Not grievances, not complaints, resolutions. I will never again assume someone else will speak for me. I will not hand over my silence, because it's easier than being uncomfortable. I will ask hard questions, even when the answers might scare me. I will remember that dignity is not something granted, it's something claimed. I will call Lucinda every week. I will keep a copy of the article printed and folded in my drawer. I will not forget how close I came to disappearing. And I will not let that happen to anyone else if I can help it. I capped the pen, folded the list, slipped it into the same envelope with the medical records. For safekeeping, for remembering. Some nights, when the wind rustles through the lilac bush and the house creaks with its age, I lie awake and think, it could have ended differently. It almost did. I could have stayed quiet. I could have obeyed. I could have flushed my life down with those hospital pills and never looked up again. But I didn't. I sat up. I looked back. And I remembered who I was. The invitation sat on my mantel for 3 weeks before I let myself pick out a dress. Not because I didn't plan to go. I did. I'd said yes the moment Claire handed me the envelope. But something in me resisted the ritual of it. Maybe I needed to be sure I wasn't still the woman with a red bracelet on her wrist. Maybe I needed to feel real again before I put on anything new. In the end, I didn't buy a dress. I wore the dark blue one I'd kept for funerals, the one with the hidden stitching under the left sleeve. I paired it with a shawl from years ago, something with color, something soft. Claire said I looked elegant. I look awake, I told her. That's enough. The ceremony was long. They always are. Too many names. Too many speeches written for applause instead of memory. But I listened. Toby wore his cap like it was borrowed. He stood stiffly in the procession, eyes scanning the crowd until he found us. Claire waving, me nodding. That was enough. He smiled. Just a little. But it reached his eyes. Afterward, we stood under a canopy of white tents. Families clutched phones, snapped photos, juggled bouquets. I watched a mother cry into her son's shoulder. A father pretend not to. Claire guided me toward the edge of the lawn where Toby waited, tall and uncertain. You made it, he said. I told you I would. He hugged me, firm, awkward, real. I read the article, he whispered. I pulled back just enough to look at him. You understand now? He nodded. Yeah, I think I do. A week later, Lucinda moved into her new place. The apartment was smaller than she remembered, but the windows were wide, and the coordinator had set up a reading nook by the corner. She had her own kettle, her own slippers, and a chair that didn't squeak. I visited on a Wednesday. Lucinda opened the door herself, leaning on a cane she hated. It's not permanent, she told me. Neither is this life, I said. But we walk through it anyway. She poured tea, offered shortbread cookies, told me she'd started journaling. Mostly out of boredom, she claimed. But when I read a page, her words were sharp, observant, unforgiving in the way truth always is. "They want stories," she said. "Let's give them the real ones." That same month, I was invited to speak at a town hall meeting on elder care oversight. It was held in a multi-purpose room with bad lighting and plastic chairs, where no one clapped too loudly and no one left early. They handed me a microphone I didn't want. But I took it. I didn't tell them what to fix. I told them what to see. "Don't assume silence means safety," I said. "Don't think consent sounds like a nod. And don't ever, ever use protocol to excuse cruelty." They listened. Some took notes. One woman in the back cried quietly. Afterward, a young nurse approached me, barely out of her 20s. "My grandmother died last year," she said. "I think she'd have liked you." I squeezed her hand. "Then I'll keep showing up for her too." Claire came over more often after that, sometimes to drop off groceries, sometimes just to sit. We didn't talk about the hospital anymore, not directly. But every time she took a photo of the lilacs in bloom, every time she refilled my tea without asking how I like it, I knew we were repairing something, not the past. That doesn't get patched. But the silence between us, that had softened. One night in late June, I got a call from Nadia. "There's a senator's office asking about the yellow list," she said. "They're reviewing funding practices tied to elder care admittance policies. You started something, Hannah." I didn't say anything for a moment. "I didn't want to start something," I said. "I just didn't want to disappear." "You didn't," Nadia said. "You made sure no one else would either." I still keep the bracelet, not out of sentiment, out of proof. It lives in the drawer by my bed, next to the legal pad and the old receipts I still haven't sorted. I don't look at it often. But when I do, I remember what it felt like to be labeled without cause, to be handled, processed, stilled. I keep it to remind myself how quickly it can happen, how quickly it still might, and how one word, spoken clearly, can be louder than all the machines in the world. Summer settled into the town like a warm sigh. The lilacs had gone, their petals traded for the heavy hush of heat. But other things bloomed. Small, stubborn things. Emails from advocacy groups. Letters from women I'd never met. Quiet thank yous that came folded in stories. One woman wrote from Iowa. Said her mother had died in a facility not unlike Springdale. "I always wondered if she stayed too long because it was easier for them than letting her go," she wrote. "Your story made me wonder out loud." To someone who had answers. Another sent a photo. Her father, smiling in a garden, cane at his side. "We walked him out together," the note read. "Thanks to you." I didn't know how to hold those words, not really. I didn't earn them. I just refused to leave quietly. But maybe that was enough. Lucinda called every other evening now, sometimes just to talk about tea, or a headline, or the neighbor who kept forgetting which day was trash day. But always, her voice was firmer. "You know," she said once, "I think I was disappearing before the hospital. I think they just made it official." "You're not disappearing now," I told her. Only from people who never really looked. Claire came by with a box of my old photo albums. She'd found them in her garage, covered in dust and guilt. "I thought you might want them back," she said. "I never gave them away." She winced, then smiled. We sat at the kitchen table and flipped through pages of frozen time. Birthdays, holidays, blurry faces in sunlit parks. My husband's arms around Claire when she was 10. Toby on a sled, red-faced and wild. Me, At 39, flower on my apron, mouth half open in a laugh I no longer remembered making. "That's the year you bought me the microscope," Claire said, tapping one corner. "You told me you wanted to see ants up close. I thought I'd be a scientist." "You are," I said. "You study people now. You just do it in boardrooms." She looked at me, eyes narrowing. "I never realized how much you watched me." "Watching is what mothers do," I said, "until we stop being asked what we see." The article didn't vanish. Most things do. A week, a cycle, a blink. But this one kept being shared. Mostly among women. Mostly quiet. A librarian emailed to ask if she could print it out and leave copies on the counter. A social worker requested permission to read from it at a training session. "Of course," I told them. "It doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to all of us." One morning, I got a call from someone at a nearby university. "I teach a course on ethics and elder care," she said. "We read your story. The students had questions." "Good," I said. "They should. Would you come speak?" I laughed. "I'm old," I said. "Not extinct." The lecture hall was colder than I expected. Too many chairs, too much echo. But the students listened. I told them what happened. I left out nothing. I didn't soften it. They were future doctors, nurses, administrators. They needed the truth, unfiltered. "Dignity isn't in the charts," I said. "It's in how you listen, in what you notice, in who you look at, and who you don't." One young man raised his hand. "Why do you think no one stopped it sooner?" "Because silence is easy," I said. "And once you file someone under too old, too tired, too alone, you stop hearing them knock." Afterward, a girl with green hair waited for me near the doors. "I used to work at a place like that," she said. "I quit. Felt like I was betraying people just by being quiet." "You weren't quiet today." "No," she said. "Not anymore." At home, I added her name to a new list. Not of resolutions, of fighters. I don't keep them in a drawer. I keep them on paper clipped to my fridge. A growing sheet titled "Still Here." Lucinda's name was first. Claire's came later, then Donna, then Nadia, then the green-haired girl whose name was Ray. And beside each name, I wrote one thing: what they did when they stopped waiting to be told. Sometimes people ask me what changed. Not the system, not really, not yet. But the hush around it? That cracked. People talk now, share now, question now. And every so often, I get a letter that says just one sentence: "Because of you, they listened." I don't want applause. I want change. But I've learned something about the space in between. It's where stories live. It's where dignity grows back. One voice at a time. I had just settled in for the evening, tea steeping, windows open to let the last breath of summer in, when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice wasn't. "Mrs. McCrae, this is Camille Jameson, from the Office of Patient Advocacy." I sat straighter. "I remember. We've concluded our internal review of Springdale Regional." "And?" "There were findings." She said it with the weight of someone who has used that phrase too many times to pretend it still means anything. "What kind of findings?" "The yellow list, for starters. They're calling it an unauthorized tracking system." "Unauthorized," I echoed, as though the problem was a signature missing. Camille was quiet. "We've issued a directive. The hospital must dismantle all unofficial patient categorization tools and submit to external auditing for 1 calendar year." "And the staff who maintained it?" "Some are under further review. Some have already been reassigned. Not fired. We don't oversee personnel, but we've made recommendations. I leaned back in my chair. Recommendations are polite. That list wasn't. I know, she said. And for once, she sounded tired in a way I understood. The next day I wrote to Nadia. She called within the hour. They're doing damage control, she said. Hospital PR is trying to spin this as a miscommunication between departments. And Lucinda? She's safe, but that doesn't mean the system is. Print that. I intend to. Lucinda and I went to the park that weekend. It was warm for September, the kind of warmth that always feels borrowed. She walked more now, slowly, cane in hand, steps careful, but hers. I got a call from someone at the hospital, she said, as we sat on a bench under a maple tree. What did they want? To check on me, she said, smiling thinly. Asked how I was adjusting. Said they were reviewing past cases. Felt like someone reading from a script. And how did you respond? I asked if they wanted to know how many nights I lay in bed wondering if I was still a person. My throat tightened. What did they say to that? They said thank you, then hung up. Lucinda reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I've started writing, you know, not just journals, real things. Sent one to a magazine. I took the paper. It was a short essay, titled, I Was Quiet Until I Wasn't. I read the first line aloud. They told me I was lucky, but I've learned luck is just what people call it when you survive their neglect. I looked at her. She held my gaze. You're not done, I said. Neither are you. That Monday, Claire and I met with a lawyer. Not because I was suing. I wasn't. I didn't want money, but I wanted a paper trail. A real one. We filed a formal request to examine hospital financials related to Medicare billing codes for short-term elder admissions. Claire handled the language. I handled the questions. Why this now? The lawyer asked. Because people think what happened was an error, I said. And I need them to understand it was a pattern. He nodded slowly. You're building something. I'm finishing what they tried to bury. Toby called that night. Mom said you're basically leading a revolution. I laughed, just making noise. I'm proud of you, Grandma. I hadn't expected that. It hit deeper than I thought. Thank you, I said. But don't be proud of the noise. Be proud of the silence I refused. He paused. Think you'll write a book? I think the world has enough books, but maybe it needs more voices. The next time I visited the hospital, not as a patient, not even as a guest, just passing through, I saw a sign on the third-floor wall. Patient rights are human rights. If you feel overlooked, speak. If you feel unheard, ask again. It wasn't a miracle, it was a poster, but it wasn't nothing. That night, I pulled the red bracelet from the drawer. I placed it beside Lucinda's essay, and Donna's email, and my own letters, not as trophies, as reminders of how close we all are to being forgotten, and how easy it is to pull someone back into the light if only you're willing to call their name out loud. Fall arrived in sharp, amber-edged steps. The air smelled like turning leaves and old soil, and for once, I didn't mind the cold in my joints. It reminded me I was still here, still moving. I'd started walking more, down to the corner store, around the block, past the old church with the cracked bell. People waved now, not just because they knew me, but because they remembered. And memory, when shared, becomes something sturdier than reputation. It becomes belonging. One afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Levinson, 79, cane with tennis balls on the feet, hair like a storm cloud. They tried to pull something like that with my sister in Phoenix, she said, tapping her cane hard against the sidewalk. But now I bring your article to every doctor's appointment. I make copies. Leave them in waiting rooms. She winked. It's become part of my purse. I wanted to hug her. I didn't. But I touched her arm and said, "Thank you for carrying it." She looked at me, eyes sharper than most I'd ever known. I carry it because it's the only damn thing I've read in years that didn't lie to me. Lucinda's piece got published. A small magazine. One of those independent ones with smudged ink and real editors who care. She called me the moment she got her author's copy. I cried, she said, not because it's big, but because it's mine. She read her author bio to me over the phone. Lucinda Delgado is a writer living in assisted housing with a view of trees and her own kettle. This is her first published work. I hung the line up and sat in silence for a long time. Then I picked up a pen and wrote her a letter. Not a message, not a text, a real letter, on real paper. Because if dignity begins with being heard, it continues with being remembered. Claire brought a folder the next time she visited. She'd been compiling records, patterns, not just from Springdale, but from hospitals around the region. Facilities with high elder admission rates, long observation holds, suspicious billing timelines. "You started something," she said, "but it can go further." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I want to build a coalition," she said. "Not just advocacy, oversight, legal leverage, data analysts, whistleblowers, patient families." I stared at her. "You?" She laughed softly. "Turns out I was listening, even when I wasn't." She reached across the table. "You in?" I didn't answer with words. I just slid my teacup toward her side of the table, a gesture we hadn't shared since she was a teenager sneaking sugar into mine. She smiled. "Thought so." The group formed quietly, like anything worth keeping. A retired judge, a nurse who used to code charts for billing, a social worker with a file cabinet full of stories. We met monthly, in libraries, in back rooms of churches, over Zoom when someone couldn't travel. I listened more than I spoke. But when I did speak, people listened. It was a strange kind of power, not the kind that comes with credentials or titles, the kind that comes when people know your scars are real. One night, a young man named David stood up during a meeting. "My grandmother never left the place they put her," he said. "We didn't even know she'd been marked non-responsive. She just stopped getting visits. We assumed it was age. Now I think it was silence." He looked at me. "You gave me permission to be angry." "Thank you." I nodded. You're allowed to be angry, but don't let it be your finish line. Let it be your start. The articles kept coming. Not always about me. That was the best part. Others wrote. Others stepped forward. Donna gave an interview, her voice blurred for privacy, but her words clear as truth. Claire published a white paper. Toby called more often, sometimes just to say he was reading something, sometimes just to say he wasn't forgetting. I started keeping a second list on my fridge. This one with dates, not deaths, not losses. Wins. Lucinda's publication, October 14th. First hospital under review, November 2nd. Town hall vote to add Elder Oversight Board, November 19th. First legal complaint filed by the coalition, December 3rd. And one more. A note. Claire left me one morning, folded beside the kettle. "We're making something, and it's stronger than fear." Not every day was good. There were mornings when I woke up and my hands wouldn't move the way they used to. Days when I forgot the right word. Nights when the silence returned and made itself too comfortable. But those days weren't the only days. And I'd learned by now that strength isn't in how loud you are. It's in how long you stay standing, even when you're the only one, especially then. The snow came early that year. Heavy, wet, unannounced. It blanketed everything in the kind of quiet that feels holy and dangerous all at once. A hush so deep even the birds seemed to pause mid-flight. I watched it from my kitchen window, hands curled around a chipped mug of tea, and thought, this is how they want the world to feel after you're gone. Still, uncomplicated. But I knew better now. Stillness isn't peace, and quiet isn't consent. The coalition gained momentum through the cold. We weren't many, but we were relentless. Letters went out to state boards. Policy briefs landed on desks that had never been dusted by citizen hands before. Claire led most of it, firm but clear. She had a way of speaking in full stops. No room for reinterpretation, no soft edges to be trimmed away. She reminded me of someone. Me, I think. From before I got used to nodding through appointments. Lucinda's second piece got accepted in January. This time, the magazine used her full name. Her author photo showed her beside her window, a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. The trees behind her blurred into gentle color. The title was simple, I'm Still Here. Underneath, a line that made me put the paper down and cry, when you let someone vanish, don't pretend you don't know where they went. She called me later. Think they'll let me write a third? They'd be fools not to. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. The postman usually dropped things at the box, and Claire always texted first. But there, standing on my front step, was Marla, the nurse supervisor. She wasn't in uniform, just a long coat, hair down, gloves in her hand. I read the piece, she said when I opened the door. Lucinda's and yours. I've been thinking. I didn't say anything. I didn't invite her in, but I didn't close the door either. I quit last week, she added. Not because they asked. They didn't. But because I kept hearing your voice every time I read a file. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Thinner than the last one I'd seen, but familiar. Do you know how many names were on the yellow list when it ended? I shook my head. 37. She handed me the folder. It's clean. Just initials. No patient data. But I thought you deserved to know. I took it without thanks. Just a nod. She stepped back down the porch, boots crunching in the snow. I was part of it, she said. But I'm trying not to be anymore. Then she walked away. That night, I sat with the list. 37 lines. Some with notes like, no family, frequent falls, resists bathing. It was never about danger. It was always about ease. Who could be shaped? Who wouldn't complain? I read every line like a prayer. Not to mourn, to remember. And remembering now felt like its own kind of justice. Claire and I submitted the list to the oversight board the next week, as supporting evidence, as warning. They're not numbers, I said at the hearing. They're warnings written in human shorthand. If you look at them right, you can see every excuse the system ever whispered to itself. One of the board members, a man with tired eyes and a soft voice, asked what we wanted from them. Protection, Claire said. Transparency and fear. He looked confused. We want them to know we're watching, she explained, and that they should be afraid to forget it. In February, Donna sent me a letter, not an email, a real letter in neat, looping cursive. She'd left nursing altogether. was working with a patient advocacy nonprofit now, traveling, training others to spot the quiet wrongs. She closed with this: "You helped me find the line I won't cross again. I didn't even know I had one until I saw you draw yours in permanent ink." I think about that ink a lot now. How long it takes to lay down a boundary. How short the distance is between silence and complicity. How many people simply needed permission to speak. We gave it to each other, and now it's spreading. The wind outside howled as I added 2 new names to the fridge list. One was a woman from out of state who called me crying. The other was her mother, still alive, now at home. The list is long now. I keep thinking I'll run out of magnets, but the names keep coming, and I keep writing. Because that's the thing about remembering. It isn't a task. It's a practice. A decision we make. Again and again and again. The morning the first hospital settled, I was folding laundry. Nothing grand. Just a Tuesday. The news came by email. A simple PDF from Claire marked confidential, do not share. I opened it next to a basket of clean socks. They'd agreed to pay restitution to 21 families. No admission of wrongdoing, just a commitment to reviewing internal processes and improving communication with elder care patients. I stared at the words for a long time. My thumb caught on the seam of a towel I'd had since 1986. The fabric thinned by years, still useful, still holding. Lucinda called 5 minutes later. "Did you see it?" I did. "They think money makes it right." "It doesn't," I said. "But it means they noticed." She exhaled. I wish my mother had lived to see this. She never trusted hospitals. Used to say, "They'll feed you bland soup and call it compassion." I laughed. She was right. That week, I went to a funeral. Not someone I knew well. A neighbor, Mrs. Fallon. 92. Sharp to the end. They said she died peacefully, which I've learned is a phrase that sometimes means quiet enough not to ask questions. But her daughter stood up and said something that stayed with me. "She wasn't an easy woman," she said, "but she made sure the world knew she existed." There it was, the whole fight, wrapped in a single sentence. Claire and I started drafting a bill. We didn't think it would pass, not at first. But we wanted it on the record. A law requiring all hospitals in the state to publicly report elder observation holds over 72 hours, and to assign a patient advocate to every individual over 75 with no listed family. We called it the Dignity Clause. It was Claire's idea to name it that. "You think they'll laugh at it?" she asked one night. "I think if they do, they weren't meant to carry it." By March, Lucinda had been asked to speak at 3 events. She declined 2, accepted 1. "I don't want to be a symbol," she said, "but I do want them to know my voice doesn't crack when I say what happened." I sat in the front row when she spoke. She wore the same scarf from her author photo. A woman in the back whispered, "She looks like a poet." She was. She said, "They marked me as compliant because I didn't scream." But survival isn't silence. It's noticing. And I noticed. Then someone else did too. And then we weren't alone. I watched the crowd shift, lean in. No one moved. That's what truth does. It doesn't shout. It hums under your ribs and makes it hard to breathe until you answer. I started hearing from men, older ones I didn't expect. One man from Connecticut wrote, "I never thought I'd read a story that sounded like mine. I thought being dismissed was just what happened when you aged. But you reminded me I can still be difficult. Thank you for that." Another, from Texas, My son printed out your article, left it on my desk. He didn't say anything, but that paper sat there for a week. Then I read it. I haven't let them drug me to sleep since. One evening, Claire came over with a bottle of something sparkling and a look in her eye. "What now?" I asked. "They scheduled the first reading of our bill?" I blinked. "They're actually putting it forward?" She grinned. "They had to. Enough people wrote in. Your name comes up in half the letters." I sat down hard. Then I said something I hadn't said in years. "I'm proud of you." Claire looked at me. "I needed to hear that," she said. "And I want Toby to hear it too. From me." We drove to see him the following weekend. His apartment was cluttered, warm, honest. He made us coffee and pulled up a chair and asked questions. About the bill, about Lucinda, about me. "Were you always like this?" he asked. "No," I said. "I was quiet once, but not anymore." He looked at Claire. "You too?" She laughed. "Especially me." He raised his mug. "To loud women." We clinked our cups. "To the ones who never got the chance," I said. The day ended with rain. Claire drove back while I stared out the window, watching water race across glass like it was in a hurry to reach something. The world blurred, but it didn't disappear. I rested my hand on her arm as she drove. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Sometimes healing doesn't look like apologies. Sometimes it looks like driving home with someone who remembers which road is yours. The morning they voted, I wore the same blue dress. The one from Toby's graduation. The one I'd nearly thrown away years ago, thinking it belonged to a woman I didn't recognize anymore. But I did now. I knew her. She was the one who'd walked back into Springdale and said no. Claire picked me up at 8. The courthouse was already full by the time we arrived. Students, caregivers, a few reporters. Lucinda was there too, in the front row. Her scarf had changed, but her eyes hadn't. "You look like you mean business," she whispered. "I look like someone who's done being quiet." She nodded. "Same." The reading lasted 2 hours. Legal language. Procedural back and forth. One amendment we didn't like. One clause they tried to soften. Claire stood to speak. So did I. I didn't plan to. I hadn't written anything down. But when the floor opened, I rose. My knees ached. My voice didn't. "I'm not here because I want revenge," I said. "I'm here because I want prevention." They stared. They listened. "You already know what the problem is." It's written in every ignored request, every note that says non-compliant, every chart left in a drawer because no one thought that person had anyone who cared. I took a breath. "You want a reason to pass this? I'm standing in front of you. That's the reason." I sat. Claire reached over, squeezed my hand once, then didn't let go. The vote passed. Narrowly, but it passed. And in that breath, in that narrow, trembling breath between tally and verdict, I remembered what it was like to think I'd never be seen again. Lucinda and I celebrated with cheap pastries and better tea. The kind you heat in a real kettle, not a machine. "They'll try to water it down," she said. "I know." "They'll look for ways to sidestep it." "I know." She lifted her cup. "So, we stay loud?" I smiled. Always. The article was updated. Nadia added a final paragraph. Today, Hannah McRae stood in front of a legislative body and turned her story into law. She didn't do it alone, but she was the first. And in the quiet she broke, thousands found their voice. Toby came to visit the following week. He brought a plant, a small, stubborn thing with glossy leaves. "Something to mark the vote," he said. We set it by the window, next to the lilac bush outside. and I told him quietly, "This isn't the end." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a softness in his face that wasn't uncertainty. It was recognition. "I know," he said. "It's the beginning." The list on my fridge has grown too long for one page. I've moved to a corkboard. Every name pinned there was once a silence. Every silence became a sound. If you're reading this, maybe you know someone like Lucinda. Maybe you are someone like me. Maybe you've sat in a room and been told it's just procedure, while something inside you whispered, "No, this isn't care. This is erasure." Don't let that whisper die. Make it louder. Speak for the ones who think they're alone. Share the stories that make the walls crack. Write letters. Call your people. Knock on doors. Show up. They'll try to ignore you. Let them try. Then make it impossible. You don't need a title to make a difference. You just need to remember who you are and refuse to be rewritten. If this story meant something to you, share it. Say why. Say it loudly. And don't stop. We're still here. We always were.